Oh, come on! Hey everybody, this is the Broken Controller Club. As always, my name's Ed. When I finished my first Atari Flashback Classics collection, I was reminded by some of you that there are 2 more volumes to do before I can really consider myself done with this whole series. The last volume, at least to me, had most of its value in the arcade games, and the rest of the cartridge games on it were not great, if I'm being polite. And that's a shame because arcade games only made up about a quarter of what was available to play. Now, like last time, I'm separating all of these apart into large groups of mini reviews, and today I'm reviewing the arcade games. Then after that will be 3 groups of the cartridge games. Now, Volume 2's format is the same as the last one, like even the music is the same on the menus. You've got lots of extra info about the games, and there are manuals, instructions on how to set up your Atari, which was vastly more complicated back then than it is now, and you get to see what the cartridges looked like as well. Personally, I love the artwork on these because they look nothing like the actual games. Like the casino cartridge, for example, shows an illustration of people playing the games, and there's like some rich gold digger in the art, probably waiting on some fat, bald loser to win a bunch of money so she can get him to spend it all on her. I sound like I'm speaking from experience, but joke's on you, I'm bald, but I've never actually won anything in my life. Anyways, that's enough of that. Let's get on to the games. I've always really liked Asteroids. The gameplay is simple and easy to learn, and it's a vector game, meaning that the graphics are made up of bright lines drawn on a vector monitor, and they're not the traditional sprites with pixels that you'd see in other games. The reason it was developed that way was to allow for precise aiming. You play a triangular ship and you're blowing up asteroids, big surprise, which split into smaller asteroids, and then you shoot those and they split up into even smaller ones after that. Occasionally a UFO will fly across the screen as well and shoot at you, and you can blow that up. In addition to shooting, you can also hit the hyperspace button, which will instantly teleport you to another part of the screen. Personally, that always got me killed, so I never used it. It might look and sound boring, but even now I can play this game for a long time, as it's very easy to talk yourself into just playing one more game after you lose all your lives. The gameplay in Asteroids Deluxe is largely unchanged, except now you can hold the button down for auto fire, and the hyperspace button was replaced with the infinitely more useful shield. A new enemy was also introduced. It's like a satellite that breaks up into smaller ships after you attack it, and they chase you around the screen. Kind of reminds me of a spider I stepped on once that I didn't know was pregnant, and a ton of spider babies came out of it. It was horrifying, and the visual that you're likely disgusted by in your mind right now still doesn't hold a candle to what I actually saw. Anyways, the graphics in this got a little bit of an upgrade as the rocks kind of rotate or tumble through space now instead of just gliding, and the original arcade machine had a background that would glow with a black light, which can't be emulated on a port like this. Just goes to show, as usual, the original is always better. Crystal Castles is not only a band from Toronto, but also one of my favorite arcade games of all time. I have memories of my mom and I playing this at Shakey's Pizza, and I'm going to describe it as a maze game that plays kind of like Pac-Man, but is on a 3D-ish playing field that changes into a different cool design on every level. You play as Bentley Bear, and your goal is to collect all the red gems that also look like cinnamon red hots, while avoiding enemies like trees, witches, skeletons, and bees. Oh, those bees. They think they're the bee's knees coming after Bentley if he takes too long in the level. But really, it's none of their beeswax what he does while he makes a beeline for the gems, and in the process runs like a crackhead at super speed through hallways, over elevators and ledges, and jumps over enemies to stun them while completing the levels. You get a bonus if you pick up the last gem, but if the enemies get them before you, then like me on prom night, all you get is shame and a half-empty bottle of Arbor Mist to finish by yourself. Maybe I should have bought some Beef Eater gin instead. Bees, bees, bees. Gravitar controls a lot like Asteroids in that you rotate your ship around and hit up on the joystick to thrust it towards the different targets on the map. What's really annoying is that each of these things has its own gravitational pull, so if you're not paying attention, you'll end up in a level you don't want to go, or you'll get sucked into what I'm assuming is the sun at the center of the level. It's not too often that I get killed within 1 to 2 seconds of starting, but it happened here. Each level is a different type of challenge, and you'll have to not only shoot enemies, but also keep your ship from crashing into the walls. Trying to do both got me killed a lot, and I might have said I hate this game on more than one occasion. Beating each of the levels also gets you a new set of levels that are even harder. Thanks, but no thanks. The name alone on the Adventures of Major Havoc is a pretty cool one all by itself, but the game is actually pretty fun too. The game has two different playstyles. The first is where you're in your ship and you're blowing up enemies. Then when you reach your destination, the next phase is a side-scroller, and you have to go through and use this reactor. It says touch the reactor. I don't really know what that means, but whatever. Then you have to escape it before it blows up. There's a few spots where the controls are terrible, like when you're jumping or when you have to actually land the ship, but otherwise this is a really fun game. Missile Command is another favorite of mine. The biggest problem I have with this one is that you're not able to play with a trackball, and the analog just doesn't do the job here in comparison. You have a few cannons with a limited supply of missiles, and your goal is to destroy each of the ICBMs before they hit your cities. Each explosion has a larger radius around it, so as you progress to harder levels and there's more ICBMs to shoot at, you'll want to try and hit multiple targets with as few missiles as possible. It starts easy enough, but gets really hard after a short time. It will test not only your dexterity, but your ability to think on your feet and plan your moves ahead of time. I really wanted Red Baron to star Snoopy and let me fly around on his doghouse, but it was not meant to be this time. Instead, you're flying around and shooting other biplanes and some blimps. In the first couple levels, the planes don't really even shoot at you, they just try to crash into you instead. Then as you get further along, they finally start shooting back. I got a good laugh out of the little house at the bottom of the screen that you'll see, because the family in there has to be freaking out at all the shrapnel and wreckage falling out of the sky around them. I mean, at least until one of the planes inevitably falls on the house and kills everybody inside. That might be less funny. If you watched part 4 of Volume 1's review where I played a game called Sprint Master, then you'll probably know that my hatred for that game is pretty much the same for this one. The controls here are awful and make the car almost impossible to steer competently, and one of the computer car's sole mission is to sideswipe you when it passes you so that it'll make you crash. If this were Grand Theft Auto, I would have blocked the car from moving, gotten out and shot the driver in the face, then used his own car to back over him. In real life, I wouldn't be so dramatic and I would have just lit the arcade machine on fire, because f*** this game. Last up for today's arcade games is Super Breakout. If you've ever played Breakout or Arkanoid or whatever else that looks exactly like this, then you know what to expect. You got this little paddle that you use to hit the ball and break all the blocks, and it eventually gets faster until you miss. Then it starts slow again. In this one, the level slowly scrolls down over time, so you've got some added pressure to try and knock out all the blocks. Also, there's no power-ups in this, so if you're like me and hope for a larger paddle or lasers or whatever, those aren't here. It's just you, the ball, and some bricks. It was alright, and back when this game was released in 1978, there weren't any of the other versions, bells and whistles to compare it to, so in that context, it was fun. Compared to so many much better clones now, though, it's just too boring. So that is all that I've got for this first part, but I've got much, much more coming. Next time, I'll use my public school education to take on a simple math game, play a really terrible golf game, and the other titles that likely contributed to the video game market crashing in the early 80s. See you next time. Congratulations! You're one of an elite few to make it to the end of the video. Reward yourself by hitting the round subscribe button in the middle, and then check out the other goodies I've got and the links next to it.